won't want to miss this story. The tale of Carl Panzram, the living nightmare that haunted the darkest corners of humanity. His name struck fear into the hearts of those unfortunate enough to cross his path. He was a force of destruction, leaving a trail of shattered lives and broken dreams in his wake. What leads a person down such a twisted path? Was it a relentless abuse of his childhood? Or was there something sinister lurking within Carl Panzram from inception? You won't believe the atrocities Carl endured as a child, almost making you pity the heinous acts he would commit in the future. Born on June 28, 1891, on a desolate farm near East Grand Forks, Minnesota, Carl Panzram's early life was shrouded in darkness. The sixth of 7 children, Panzram endured a childhood of hardships. His parents, East Prussian immigrants, subjected him to relentless abuse and forced labor. Punishments ranged from chaining to starvation. Picture a young boy, isolated and unwanted, toiling away in the fields day and night. His parents would force him to work all hours of the night on the farm, leaving young Carl with merely hours of sleep. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Eventually, young Carl fell ill, probably from his body not being able to recover and grow. His parents, enraged that he couldn't continue his work on the farm, poured scalding water into Carl's eardrum. They believed this would cure his sickness, but little did they know this act would create a monster that would torment the world for decades to come. At the tender age of 7, Panzram's life took an even darker turn when his father abandoned the family. 4 of his older brothers also left, leaving him alone in a world devoid of compassion. During those early years, Panzram embarked on a path that would lead him to infamy, the path of violence, brutality, and unwavering malevolence. Panzram's early encounters with the law came as no surprise. By the time he reached 11, he was already deemed incorrigible. Panzram, an 11-year-old alcoholic, would continue down the only path he knew. It wasn't until he stole a revolver from a neighbor's home that his criminal tendencies became clear. Here, Panzram's turbulent journey through the justice system had only just begun. It was within Minnesota State Training School that he would experience a living nightmare. Panzram faced a relentless cycle of violence and abuse at the hands of staff members. Carl, who was sodomized daily, started to develop a deep, relentless rage that knew no boundaries. It was in this crucible of suffering that Panzram's rage took root, fueling the darkness that dwelled within him. But what he would do next will make your skin crawl, as the world was soon to find out. After leaving from the training school, Carl Panzram's troubled journey continued to unfold. With a taste for rebellion, he embarked on a path littered with criminality and despair. By his early teens, he had already succumbed to alcoholism, living a criminal life consisting of offenses. He soon found himself on the run, living as a vagabond, traversing the country by train cars. It was during this tumultuous period that Panzram experienced an incident. A group of homeless men subjected him to sexual abuse, acts Carl was all too familiar with, triggering deep violence within. From that point on, his rage and darkness only intensified, propelling him further down a path of violence and devastation. At 14 years old, he made an audacious attempt on the life of a Lutheran church, armed with a revolver. Now towering over the men who used to torment him, Carl took his vengeance upon the pastors, sodomizing and torturing them as they did to him years before. Getting his revenge on the sick pastors of the church, Carl began his run from the law, traveling via train cars and engaging in a string of burglaries and robberies. His criminal activities spanned across different states, adopting various aliases to evade capture. From California to Texas, Oregon to Montana, Panzram left a trail of stolen goods and shattered lives in his wake. Imprisonment became a recurring theme in his life. He faced numerous stints behind bars, each failing to rehabilitate the darkness that consumed him. This all just a precursor to the unimaginable horrors to come. If you thought his past was bad, wait till you hear about his future acts. As Carl Panzram's criminal journey progressed, his acts of violence escalated, plunging him further into the depths of depravity. Following his escape from a chain gang sentence in Texas, he ventured into Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, with the intention of joining the Federales. However, it was here that Panzram claimed his first known act of murder. He abducted, assaulted, and strangled a man, stealing money from his victim. This chilling act of violence foreshadowing the horrors to come. In his pursuit of terror, Panzram's path was marked by chaos and destruction. Now fully grown and standing 6 feet tall, Carl burglarized, assaulted, and sodomized his victims, laying waste to all whom he crossed. From the US-Canadian border, where he set fire to buildings and churches, to his time in the United States Army, where insubordination stained his record, Panzram's brutality knew no bounds. Panzram's thirst for violence and dominance manifested in his encounters with fellow inmates. Incarceration only seemed to fuel his rage as he clashed with authorities. His crimes continued in severity, and you ask yourself, how could this story get any worse? But it does. Carl Panzram's murder spree was a horrifying manifestation of his sadistic nature. After burglarizing the Taft mansion and stealing William Howard Taft's handgun, he embarked on a nightmarish voyage of bloodshed and sexual violence. Panzram used Taft's stolen money to buy a sailing yacht named Akista, which would become his floating chamber of horrors. For months, Panzram would lure unsuspecting sailors from port bars onto the Akista, where he would give them alcohol before subjecting them to his twisted desires, their lifeless bodies littering the vast ocean. Panzram's terror aboard the Akista would come to a sudden end when the yacht sank near Atlantic City. His last 2 potential victims somehow managed to escape the crazed killer. His journey led him to Angola, a Portuguese colony in southern Africa, where Panzram found work as an oil rig foreman. But Carl's twisted sadism would soon reveal itself, and out of sheer malevolence, he burned the oil rig down, reveling in the destruction he caused. In Angola, Panzram's monstrous appetite for sexual violence reached its most abominable depths. He sought out young girls, paying families in Angola for their innocence. He would abuse these vulnerable children in his shack. He confessed to the abuse and murder of an Angolan boy. His chilling words convey a complete lack of remorse. From the shores of Long Island Sound to the depths of Angola, Carl would leave a trail of bloodshed in his wake. In his confessions, Panzram displayed a complete absence of empathy or conscience. He reveled in his monstrous acts, expressing pride in his ability to commit acts of sexual violence without a shred of remorse. Panzram's behavior exhibited traits of psychopathy, complete disregard for the well-being of others, a lack of remorse or guilt, and a profound sense of superiority and entitlement. His overwhelming violent tendencies were evident in his constant clashes with authority figures. His unwavering aggression and sadism roots in a deep-seated hatred for humanity. Panzram saw himself as a force of destruction, viewing the world as a cesspool of corruption and cruelty. He sought to perpetuate this darkness, to inflict suffering, to revenge against a society he believed had rejected and wronged him. Panzram's psychological makeup was marked by an insatiable appetite for power and control. His acts of violence, particularly sodomy, served as a means to assert dominance and exert his will over his victims. But as Carl would have it, his end would be just as riveting as his rise to fame. You will be shocked at his final words on death row. Carl Panzram's execution and capture marked the culmination of his reign of terror and the eventual end to his violent rampage. After being arrested in Baltimore for burglary, Panzram once again found himself behind bars. During his interrogation, he shockingly confessed to a long list of murders, including the chilling account of killing 22 young boys and over 1,000 acts of sodomy. It wasn't until Carl killed a foreman in the laundry room for bothering him that he was sentenced to death by hanging. His defiance and rage were palpable as he spat in the face of the executioner, attempting to place the black hood over his head. Panzram's last words remaining true to his emotionless character. Carl shouted at the executioner, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard! I could hang a dozen men while you're screwing around." The execution served as a dark and final chapter in Panzram's twisted existence. On September 5, 1930, he was hanged, his life extinguished in an act of retribution for the lives he had taken. Buried in an unmarked grave, his final resting place bore only his prison number, a stark reminder of the horrors he had unleashed upon the world. Carl Panzram's capture and execution brought an end to his reign of terror. The haunting legacy of his crimes and the profound darkness within him remain etched in the annals of true crime history. Did society create this monster, and if so, will we see its resurrection